Welcome to Part the System, and today I'm with Sarah Ludowici. How are you, Sarah?
Good. I'm definitely a little bit nervous, but I'm good.
Oh, you're going to be fantastic. So a little bit about you. You're an exercise physiologist, rehab Pilates instructor, and ultra trail runner. By day, you service the remote Indigenous communities of the Kimberley, where you are well versed in supporting individuals in lifestyle change. She's experienced working with people living with severe mental illness and chronic disease management and prevention by using exercise as a vehicle for self-growth. She supports individuals along their journey of change while understanding that each individual is unique and an expert within themselves. I love that, Sarah. And you are also a massive ultra trail runner, and you've represented Australia at the World Championships twice and podiumed at multiple races around Australia, which is absolutely fantastic. And you regularly have fun adventures on trails around the world. Now, you love sharing the joy of exercise with others and supporting people with their own movement journey. And you stand to support others to experience the interconnectedness between the mind, body, and environment. So welcome, Sarah. How are you going?
Good. Thank you. Yeah, excited to have a chat with you today.
Yeah, cool. Tell me, where have you done some of these trail runs around the world?
Well, yeah, a lot have been in Australia. So I had the opportunity to go to some great trails from Tasmania, Queensland. I love the Blue Mountains. That would have probably been my local stomping ground when I was living back in Sydney. I'm learning to love the trails up in the Kimberley, which are flat, hot, and very, very sandy. So it's a different sort of discomfort running through the trails up here. But I've had the opportunity to run in Portugal. That was my first World Trail Champs. And then I also just recently ran over in Chiang Mai in Thailand. They've got hills over there that you don't really see in Australia at all. I've also done a few runs in India, just spare of the moment whilst I am traveling around or backpacking around. And I have to say that probably was one of the hardest ones because I hadn't trained for it and felt very sore the next day. But I loved seeing different quirks from the different countries all around the world, like, running with like chai tea before the race and a Zumba warm up and Vada, which are like sort of deep fried savory donuts in India. So it's always fun to see that.
Yeah, wow. So at least you get to travel a bit of the world and get involved in some of the local food and obviously run a few Ks as well. So I'm sure that somehow contributes to your own well-being. But yeah, what does well-being mean to you?
Yeah, I guess I, over the years, have shaped or defined well-being as a link between all sorts of different things. So my individual self, but also the community around me, and in particular, nature. And I guess for me, trail running is a great way of bringing all of that together, getting to appreciate and respect the environment around me, but also learning to link the mind and the body there. I think, with exercise, it's a really valuable tool for knowing, what is okay discomfort that you can move through and what is not okay discomfort, and where you've got to really listen to that body. And for me, well-being, I guess I really consider it as, I like to think of it as like an anchor in the sea or the ocean. And that anchor represents, I guess, who you'd like to be in the world. So well-being also incorporates those values and, I guess, the person who I'd like to be and present up every day as. So well-being involves all those different things that help bring me back to that anchor point of who I am, including the mind, the body, family, community, nature, all of those things.
Yeah, so it sounds like it's a real intention for you about being, the best representation of yourself and, the contribution of your work. Obviously these massive races with your trail running and the environment as well. And I want to kind of unpack that environment a little bit more because you're up in the Kimberley, Western Australia. Like tell us about Yeah, how you've ended up there, and also a bit of your background as well, Sarah, would be fantastic.
Yeah, absolutely. The Kimberley is a really special place. I think it's very different to my life in Sydney. I was only reflecting this morning that usually what my mornings would be, wake up, drive, run, coffee on the way to work, get to work, like shower at work, start the day, be eating breakfast and coffee at work. Whereas here, go for a run, go home, take my dogs to the beach, then go back, take my other dog to the beach because I take them out separately, and then go get a coffee, breakfast. And so it's a very just different existence. But what I do love about Kimberley is that it is quite connected to the environment over time. And I've been here for a year now. And so you get an understanding of how, you look at the moon to know what's happening with the tides, to know when you can go to the beach, because there's big tides here. And if you get it wrong, you can lose your car. So, and the cyclical nature as well of the seasons. You've got the wet and the dry season here, and you do very different things based on what season it's in. And so it feels very in touch with nature and those sort of cyclical things that happen here, and where to go fishing at different points based on the tides. And when you see the dragonfly, they're eating the mozzies, and that there's salmon, it's a good time to go catching salmon and all that sort of stuff. So I think it's really nice to be a bit more in touch with that. I guess I ended up here. I've always been interested in working in the Aboriginal health space, and I guess that was sparked in me early on. When I finished school and went to university, I'd work hard throughout the year and spend those 3 months over the Christmas time going and backpacking around the world, and often would volunteer and try to embed myself in culture there. And I guess that sort of made me feel like I wanted to work in this sort of space where I could help and support vulnerable communities. And I remember thinking, where in the world, like which community would I choose? And then I guess I was aware of the, inequalities right here on our own back doorstep, and sort of thought, in the future, I'd love to help or love to use exercise as a tool, to support well-being. And at that point, I wasn't aware of anything that existed already in that space. So I thought, 20, 30, 40 years into my career, that's something that I'd like to create. But I did then come across the Institute of Urban Indigenous Health, where I was like, wow, that like they're already doing that. That's what I want to do. Landed a job there in southeast Queensland, pretty like 6 months after I finished uni, and ran this program called the Work It Out program, which was a chronic disease prevention and management program. And I really loved working for RUIH. They was really great. They had really great infrastructure in their organisation that was addressing the social determinants of health, including 50% of the organisation identified as Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander. They had traineeships and programs that were embedded to support kids in the community to work towards employment. Get given the opportunity to work alongside occupational therapists, exercise physiologists, dietitians, and get to experience their day to day, so that they perhaps might one day be like, that's what I want to do, and then be supported in that process. And I really respect how the organisation was like, I guess, example of that, and taking the lead in actively addressing the social determinants of health. That gave me a great opportunity to, they had great programs where staff would come and we'd yarn together and get to share perspectives. And I think that really helped me understand, different ways of being and seeing and doing, which, I still carry with me today.
Mm.
I then, unfortunately, would have loved to have stayed there for a lot longer, but I did move back home to Sydney to be with my now husband. So it was a positive in one way, a negative in the other. But went into mental health, so for Sydney Local Health District and severe mental illness. And I guess, there's similar life expectancy gaps in that population as well. And lifestyle change being a similar theme for and with chronic prevention and chronic disease management and prevention. And so, yeah, I really enjoyed my time at SLHD as well. Got to support a lot of people using exercise as that vehicle again for, improving their overall health. But a constant theme through all of this that I've always seen is how powerful that group element is, and that social emotional well-being that you get from being with other people and supporting each other through that journey. And so I do believe that for long-term sustainable lifestyle change, it is important to, you might initially come for the exercise, but you stay for that community that you build, and that sort of self-confidence that you develop as you're doing the exercise. So yeah, and then eventually this opportunity came up at in the Kimberley, the Boab Health Services, where I'm the first exercise physiologist in this organisation.
Wow.
And so there was a layer of not just going in and doing the day-to-day clinical work, but actually building a service. And yeah, I guess that was a really great opportunity for me to get back into that space that I'd always sort of wanted to work in. And yeah, took the leap and moved up here. It was COVID. My husband wasn't necessarily going to be able to get into WA. It was hard enough to get me into WA. I did 14 days hotel quarantine
Wow.
twice. But yeah, it was a great opportunity. And yeah, I think there are a few other exercise physiologists that are up here, but no one is practicing clinically. So yeah, it's been a challenge, but been really valuable, like so much learning, which has been great.
For an early part of your career, because you are still relatively young, you have done so much. It's quite incredible, Sarah. And I think, yeah, all that experience is very rich. And I'm sure it's going to really, hold you in good stead as you move forward. But now that you are at Boab Health Service, like, tell me where they fit in within like the health and well-being system.
Yep. So, yeah, Boab Health Service is a not-for-profit organisation, and we have an allied health team that includes diabetes educators, podiatrists, dietitians, paediatric dietitians, and now one exercise physiologist. We also have the mental health team is also under Boab Health Services, and we also have the integrated teen care, which is a funding program under Medicare. And yes, we've got a pretty broad team, and we've got offices in Broome and Kununurra, and we service, the sort of east and the west Kimberley, with lots of remote travel from all of our clinicians. So they travel around on sort of like, I guess, like approximately a monthly rotation to the different communities and offer those sort of supports. We link in with the Aboriginal medical services that service each of those locations. So I guess we come in as a service provider, and we get referrals via the GP. So that's the main sort of role of Boab Health Services. There's I know in the East Kimberley, they have this great one-stop shop program where, it is those allied health clinicians working quite closely together. But because each of the communities are very different, the services look different based on, well, what the service actually is, but also what community they're working in.
Yeah. So tell me, like, what's a typical day for you? Or
Yeah.
is it different? Because you're saying, each community is a little bit different, and you're the first, pioneering in terms of being an exercise physiologist in the health service up there. Like, yeah, I'd love you to share.
Yeah, well, so I guess the exercise physiology program was, I guess, trying to support a bit of a different way of servicing the communities, because our allied health clinicians and even the mental health clinicians have high wait lists, and they go to the communities once a month. They often, experience like a high DNA rate, and it might be that they're not necessarily seeing people, they might see them once and then not again for 6 to 12 months. And so with lifestyle change and, motivational interviewing and that sort of, it's really tricky to then support them to make change, especially with the mounting barriers that, food insecurity and, I could go on for a little bit there, but it's really hard to make that sort of lifestyle change. So I guess my role's trying to do it a little bit differently. I'm not necessarily doing that one-to-one, and I've had the opportunity to only focus on 2 communities, so Broome and Bijadanga. And Bijadanga is 2 hours south of Broome, so it's one of the closest communities to Broome, but also one of the largest communities. The recent census had it about 650 people living there, but in the past it was about 750 to 800. But that information isn't necessarily always reliable, so we're kind of just going off that for the moment. But yeah, so a large part of my role was getting to just go to community and really build those relationships and build that trust, which meant it was quite challenging because a lot of the time it felt like what am I doing? What am I doing here? Not necessarily feeling maybe welcome. But over now, having gone for a whole 12 months, it's really nice to feel that I've gone through those, and I'm sure there'll be more, but gone through those periods where it's really tricky. And I am earning that trust and those relationships to a degree now that people are kind of asking me and calling me for support. And I think that's sort of a good reflection that it does take time. I've even felt that the health services are so turbulent. People come and leave. They might be there for 3 months, 6 months, and then they're gone. And so, understanding that, I appreciate how hard it is to build those relationships because, like you've got to earn that trust. People, you can't. They see people come and go all of the time, and so why should I come and do exercise with you when you're going to leave in however many months? So so I get to be a bit more outside of the clinic, on the ground in the community. I've done needs assessments with the community, run some focus groups and tried to establish something that was led by the community. It's an ongoing process because, again, the communities are also transient themselves. But I think it's a process. It changes, people's perception of what exercise and healthy living is changes as well. And, I guess a lot of people might be referred to you because of weight loss, but that's not necessarily something I try to promote, and trying to support that healthy living and physical activity and movement and those social elements that you get from it. So a typical day would involve things like, especially when I'm in Bijadanga, would involve going to the Women's Art Centre where I'm treated to all of these beautiful artworks that I get to see. I watch the artists painting them, but I just go and have a yarn. Sometimes there's silence. Sometimes there's, the ladies telling me about things. Sometimes it's organising fishing trips and things like that. Just really building those connections. I then we usually potter over to another key area in the community where I'll have some conversations and yarns and build relationships. And then I have some groups in the afternoon and one-on-one sessions where I have sort of been either sent a referral or someone's requested for that support, and it's more relevant for them to do a one-to-one. Men's group, women's group. Sometimes I get to go, fishing. I've been bogged a few times, which is always scary with the ladies, but I think I earned a little bit of respect there, like digging the car out of the sand. We've been collecting bush nuts, which has been, a great opportunity for two-way learning. Been on some women's camps, which again is a great opportunity for, two-way learning and getting to see great places that perhaps you can only go with a traditional owner, for example, where they would do a smoking ceremony, and then you can be on that particular area of land. That's sort of Bijadanga. And Broome again is a bit different. I guess I see urban Indigenous communities also very different to remote and rural Indigenous communities. My previous work with RUIH in Brisbane was more on that urban urban sort of side. Bidjadango,
Mm.
again, more on that rural and remote side. And I guess like Broome fits along that spectrum, and it's a little bit close towards the urban setting, but also it is quite rural and remote. Not as many health services up here. So yeah, each of the approaches are slightly different. I haven't had as much sort of community, like not so much community going out and building relationships with participants, more service providers. So yeah, it's a bit different. Yeah, so that's a little bit of a taste. There's obviously lots more to it, but yeah.
Yeah. And I think it sounds like you're having such a unique experience. Not many people really get to do what you're doing. And I suppose there's a lot to be privileged about, really. People taking you in and talking about, history and their cultures and so it's a huge opportunity and learning for you. And I think what's coming up for me, Sarah, it's like it takes a lot of time to build that trust. Yeah. So you're actually, working within the system. But it takes you can't just go in there and try and change things and set things up. It really is it takes a while to do that.
Absolutely. And I think one of the biggest learnings from all of this has been it's offered me insight into how much emphasis I put on my work and what I did day to day in terms of my own sort of personal self confidence or efficacy. Like I guess I was making work mean a lot for my identity. And
Mm,
it's been really interesting because, and I'm so grateful for the opportunity, because where I'm not perhaps getting that direct feedback or doing anything meaningful, it's kind of made me have to go, well, these are my definitions of, success or whatever. And so needing to like learn to, one, redefine what success is. And it isn't dependent on my definition of success. It is dependent on the community's definition, um, and what, again, what they want there. And yeah, even then, kind of identifying how, how am I doing, like just doing things, sort of feeds my own, validates me, whereas I've sort of needed to step away from the doing of things and more shift my energy into being.
mm.
Because one of the first things that happens when I see a problem is my first question I ask is like, okay, what do we do about it? And I don't necessarily think that always serves me. And my husband always jokes with me because he's like, "No, Sarah, who do you be?" So again,
That's
that's like coming full circle to that well-being, which is, who do I want to be in all of these circumstances, as opposed to what do I do in all of these circumstances.
Yeah, it sounds like there's been some big shifts for you, which
Yep.
is which sounds wonderful, really. And I think you're right. It does start with self, doesn't it? And how you show up and behave while you're with others. And sounds like a lot of what you're learning is around empathy as well. Sometimes people don't want you to solve their problems. It's just about listening. To somebody. Which is something that I struggle with sometimes because I always want to try and help people, but because I probably don't like sitting in that discomfort, myself. So it's maybe how I feel about certain things. So yeah, really interesting. And with some of these experiences that you're having, sounds like there's been some fantastic ones, whether it's fishing or you're watching Aboriginal art, for example. Like, has there been any challenging situations that maybe at the time you struggled with, but now on reflection, yeah, something that you'd be worthwhile sharing?
Yeah, I mean, I think probably the biggest difficulty is getting too caught up in the big system. When you think about all of the challenges that present for these communities, the intergenerational trauma, the food
Mm,
insecurity, access to services, I guess me learning that, when people's basic needs aren't being met, including food, shelter, and security, you can't expect people to go and exercise. And so I think, yeah, I think just sort of learning that a little bit, and learning to, navigate those systems. But then I guess I like the imagery of sort of zooming. You need to have that bigger picture to understand perhaps the barriers and the challenges, and to be empathetic, but then not getting bogged down in those big systems, and then zooming in and thinking, okay, well, what is one thing that I can do, or one person that I can support, and just sort of focusing on that. Because yeah, I mean, everybody is different. Everyone's circumstances are different. But yeah, I think it's the broader, bigger system that is probably presenting the most challenges. I guess an example would be, when we do think about the social determinants of health, employment, education, and income. One of the key parts of the program here is we are trying to support place-based care and employ sort of an Aboriginal health worker or liaison officer in the community to support me with my programs, and perhaps take a little bit more responsibility in those, especially for the times that I can't be there. And yeah, in support the community to continue to lead that and take ownership of it. But when we think about how even something like how the Centrelink payments are set up, how that would then, there's no incentive, perhaps no incentive for some people in community to actually seek out employment, because those structures rely on you to, once you put in all of your income and what you're getting, Centrelink will change the payments and start giving you less money. But because of, perhaps sorry business, or never having worked, a full-time job before, it's quite possible that might not be a consistent source of income. And so, but your payments will remain docked for a longer period of time. And so you actually ultimately end up getting less money coming in than you do if you were to work, or if when you are working than when you weren't, or you get about the same amount of pay coming in, but you're working a lot. And so it's those things make it then hard for people to want to be employed, because it's sort of, well, why should I be employed? Because I'm going to put in all of this effort but not get anything more back from it.
Yeah.
And obviously, speaking in general terms, it's not for everybody, but yeah, I guess those sorts of challenges that you hear on the ground. And then elders abuse, and if you do have income coming, even access to electricity has been, you've got to pay like a kind of like a prepaid phone card to get access to electricity. And so every time you pay, you have to then pay like $2 to top up your card. But for people who can't necessarily like afford one big outlay of an expense, means they have to top up for electricity every week. So that over time, that's a lot of money going towards just getting electricity. And then maybe they don't have access to a regular fridge, so we can't go and buy or prepare or budget food that's cold, or something like that. And so that links into elders abuse, in that people that do have perhaps access to regular money means that the family members are going there and using the food, and using their aircon, and even charging their phones. And it just all like links into this sort of big complex system that you've got to sometimes be acknowledged but not get too bogged down in it.
Because it can just be completely overwhelming, right? Like it's the complexity that you're dealing with, and for somebody that is focused on exercise physiology
Yes.
and health promotion, you're talking about people getting payments, you're talking about food, you're talking about housing, different types of abuse, all while trying to get people to be more active, and looking after themselves. So it's it's a big kind of project that you're trying to nudge, I suppose. And looking at it from a chronic disease kind of perspective, Sarah, I think we too well that 1 in 2 Australians have got a chronic disease, and it's getting worse. And I would imagine up in the Kimberley, it's worse, in some of the communities that you're working with, where people have got 2 or 3 chronic diseases. We're talking about how complex it is, but how could you see, or from your perspective, how we could kind of nudge the system to improve some of these stats?
Well, I spend all day thinking about this, and I don't necessarily have any sort of solution. And I guess, learning that there's not going to be one solution. It's all the different things moving together. So I suppose I try to, come back to how I can support, a small, or influence, or a smaller circle of people around me, and even understanding that, just by me simply having a presence in this particular community, the perception of exercise and what is normal is changing. And even whether people are coming along to my group or not, just by me simply being there, people are thinking that people are exercising and moving more, and it's starting to then make that a bit more normal. And over time, I've seen that sort of grow. Exercise is a part of this. So I guess the main things that I try to focus on is trying to bring all those different services together and collaborate. That's something that I've sort of recently, pushing for a little bit, because I think everybody's sort of working towards the same thing, but just a different lens to it. It might be, the Aboriginal Family and Legal Services. It might be, the counselling services. It might be diabetes education, housing, all of those sorts of things. I guess we are sort of all working together. So trying to bring those things in where we can work closer and collaborate, share resources and share learnings, and even share relationships, and things like that. I guess, that would be the main thing. And then otherwise, trying to hold space for, different ways of supporting your health. So often with exercise, exercise is a modern day construct. We never used to exercise, we just lived active lives. And so I see that exercise either needs to be fun or it needs to be necessary. Necessary might have been, is that incidental activity where, I'm walking because I need to get from A to B. I'm lifting these things because I need to move these things. But the things like the fishing, or, collecting bush nuts, that sort of movement there. So I guess trying to support people to understand that exercise and movement can be all of those things. It doesn't need to be going to a gym. But the funny thing is that these communities do have access to the outside world. Technology means that now they can see all of these different worlds that exist, perhaps where they might not have known it before. And so there is this blend of people who do want to buy into that sort of modern day construction of exercise and let's go to a gym and lift weights and that sort of thing. So I guess, holding space for people to integrate movement into their day, whether that be that fun stuff, being with a group, playing sport, doing basketball, football, those are really quite great strengths in the community, that competitive spirit. They love. I ran an Elders Olympics recently, and
Oh,
got
wow.
so much positive feedback from the participants who just smiling, and other service providers that helped me out who were like, I've not seen that person smile like that for so long. And in terms of the movement that's involved, there's a bit of balance, lots of throwing, hand-eye coordination, that sort of element. So that's the fun, and then the necessary. The necessary exercise is really hard in the Kimberley, I have to say, for someone who's always been quite walk, get your incidental activity, park further away and walk a little bit. It's actually really hard to do that here because of how hot it is. You could just stand outside for 2 minutes and you'd be dripping. So walking is even harder. So I guess, and then the other thing would be just the relationships, is getting to be an advocate for taking that time to build those relationships, because maybe in the short term we don't see outcomes, but definitely over the longer term we will.
Yeah, and I was just going back to your point there around, how hot it is, because I know in Western Sydney, the relationship between like tree canopy and, you know, physical activity levels there's quite a correlation there because it's too hot. I'm really feeling for you over in Western Australia when it gets so hot. It's obviously going to impact things quite considerably. But some really good ideas there, which obviously you're working on, and it sounds like you're looking at it from a really integrated type of health system, with bringing all these kind of partners together. And obviously you made the decision to go to the Kimberley, Sarah, but where do you see yourself personally in the system, and how you contribute and influence it? You've kind of touched on this a little bit, I think, but yeah, how's that for you?
Yeah, I think it's tricky. I often do probably spend a lot of or prioritize that sort of, as we talked about before, that individual responsibility in this system. I think it is important to consider, that sort of broader system and collaborate. But I guess up here I can see how the big system seems so overwhelming to overcome, which can be really tricky if you just focus on the individual level. But I would say I do spend most of my energy. One, working on myself, and that constant, reflection around what's coming up for me, what's there, and where am I making things mean things, and trying to sort of, I guess, be a bit more objective in that process. And I guess even then thinking, if there's one person I can support to be a better version of themselves through movement, then they're going to be a better father, a better brother, a better child, or whatever it might be. And so I guess I try to support people on that level mostly. So I do see that, that's sort of where I sort of slot in. And I mean, I guess not just professionally, but personally, I also, my trail running and that is, I think, a great opportunity to express, like, strong, like, female leaders. And when we're out there racing and over those longer distances, you're seeing women more and more creep up to the top. And there's definitely been a few races where I've been third overall, but third overall, but second female, or sorry, fourth overall, but second female. So, I think just, sort of climbing my own mountain to allow other people's to sort of climb their own mountain and see what's possible, all the while acknowledging my privilege in all of this. Acknowledging all of my privilege throughout this, and that everyone's got their own different journey for that. I suppose that's where ultra running really fits in with what I do professionally, because every day I'm working with people to, in a sense, be uncomfortable and find that challenge that's for them. And that might be getting out of the chair every day to walk around the block, or just walk to the letterbox. That might be their sort of ultra challenge. And I guess I see by me doing that, it offers me a way of relating and understanding, and then physically and experiencing and mentally experiencing what it takes to do something that is, like, not easy. It's uncomfortable to make change. And I do relate to, everyone always talks about motivation, and motivation goes up and down. And that's when your routines and things really help hold you in those, periods of fluctuation of motivation. But also it's also about learning when to kind of push and pull back, because there's times when exercise might be the very thing that you need, and there's times when it's not the thing that you need, because it is a stress to our body. It's a good stress to our body, but perhaps we need to take a step back before we can take a step forward, and acknowledging those things that help, take us up, like our mind and our body up in terms of intensity and things, but also those things that pull us back and take us down, and knowing when to push, like what is discomfort that I can move through, but what is discomfort that's actually my body telling me I need to pull back. Sorry, I went on a bit of a tangent there, but yeah.
You were really inspiring, Sarah. Like I loved what you were saying around you climbing your own mountain, and then maybe that'll help somebody climb their own mountain, and that could be completely different. So I think there's a real level of humility there with you, and from what you're talking about, your experience, in the Kimberley, I think it's really helping you along your journey of your connection with self, and understanding that, and which I think is really cool. And yeah, it sounds like you're really on a bit of a journey up there, I think, by the sounds of it. And yeah, a real role model, not just in your own work that you're doing with the ultra running, which I'm kind of passionate about in some way as well, doing endurance events, but not the 100 milers like you do. So that quite inspires me as well. But I think you're a real systems leader of what you're doing in your community, and that constant self-reflection that you seem to be doing, I think is really important as a systems leader, isn't it? Because everything's changing all the time, and nothing kind of stays the same, and how we show up is really important, and how we kind of influence it. So yeah, I take my hat off to you.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, it's been a fun and exciting journey, and yeah, I guess one of the things I was just thinking is, as you were saying that, is understanding those motivations, and not coming from a deficit place. I think it's so easy in the healthcare system to especially with the vocabulary around weight loss and weight, and I'm definitely a big advocate for supporting people to shift that lens towards physical fitness and well-being, which isn't necessarily your gravitational pull on the earth, but so much more.
Mhm.
But yeah, you often do see in this role people coming through and wanting to lose weight and wanting to do XYZ because of this perception that they need to fix something or something's wrong. So at an individual level, I think it's looking at people to support them exactly as they are, sorry. But yeah, but acknowledging that there's so many things that are difficult and challenging with the bigger system.
Yeah, meeting people where they're at is, what I agree. And if we're talking about exercise, just about getting people moving, isn't it?
Yeah.
It doesn't have to be an ultra race and running 100 miles. It's different for everybody. So I've really loved our conversation, Sarah, and learned so much about what you're doing up there. And I'll continue to keep an eye on the great things that you're doing. But is there anything else that you'd like to mention?
Ooh, is there anything else I'd like to mention? No, I mean, I guess the main message is, movement should be fun. Elements of play, being with people, and being out in nature, and acknowledging and listening to all of the different experiences that happen, and just quite simply trusting the process and taking one step at a time. It is easy to get overwhelmed by those, for example, the 100-mile race. It's scary thinking about that whole thing, but all I need to do is step into that 1 meter of space in front of me, and that's it. That's all I need to do, and I can do that. So, using that as a metaphor for just taking it one step at a time. I also love the imagery of a rock, and
Mhm.
a water dripping on a rock repeatedly, and it changes that rock. And it's something that we're treated to up here, as you can see how the water has changed the rocks at a place called Ganthian Point here. And I love seeing that as a visual, because that message means to me, you've just got to be consistent and you've just got to be present, and that's all you need to do, and change will happen. So that's where I kind of, use as motivation.
Oh, that's a lovely way to finish, and I love that analogy. It's like an oak tree, isn't it? You know, if you hit it in different parts, it's not gonna keel over. But if you hit it 1,000 times in one spot, then you know you'll cut it down. So yeah, fantastic. Well, thank you so much, Sarah, and yeah, wishing you all the best for the remainder of the year. We're nearly there, and hope you get some time off over the holidays to relax.
Thanks very much for having me. I've loved it.
All right, speak to you soon.
Bye.